Hello and welcome to Understanding Emotions. My name is Sankalp. Do you have trouble saying no? Have you ever had it that you did a lot for someone and somehow out of just completely outside your world, they didn't even register? Like you were there putting in all the effort in helping them, being there for them, and somehow it didn't seem to matter to this person. Have you ever had that happen to you? Have you ever had it that when someone even disliked you a little bit, even if they didn't know you, you felt really bad and it crushed you? And have you ever had it that you find it difficult to care about yourself, but you're absolutely fine caring about others? And if that is you, then what I'm describing is the classic traits and behaviors of nice persons. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about niceness. I'm going to go deep into the idea of niceness. Now, you may have seen me speak about niceness in previous episodes. You may even have read books about niceness. And so this episode, what it aims to be is to be a comprehensive guide of all my understanding of niceness from 3, 4, 5 years of study, and to really distill what psychologically niceness means, what it means for you, and more importantly, how can we overcome niceness and first be convinced that niceness and have clarity about what niceness is, and then be convinced that we have to get out of niceness, and then how do you do it? So we're going to cover the entire mile in this episode of Understanding Emotions. So first things first, the reason why I am interested in this topic is because I grew up too nice. And to me, I was baffled by the fact that, hey, look, it seems like I'm doing a lot for others. It seems like I'm being there for others. And it seems like I'm doing everything by the book, right? You have to be just a nice person. You be good to others. And hopefully that will mean that you have a good life, right? Not really, because there seems to be a difference between niceness and kindness. And I'm going to talk a bit about that, but just want to say that I am with you in this. It seems to be quite a global and normal problem, although I've seen it by the bulk in Asian and Eastern upbringings, but it's not topics limited to the East at all. In the West, I've noticed that this is a problem perhaps more common with women than with men. But having said that, obviously I am a man, and just because it's more common here doesn't mean the other side doesn't have it at all. So it's certainly quite a widespread thing. And in this video, I plan to be really comprehensive. And so if you have struggled with something like this, I hope this video is your final stop in being like, aha, now I understand it. Now, of course, I can't promise massive psychological, emotional change in just like however long this podcast runs, but I will promise to give you the key elements that I know about niceness and I know to be important about niceness. So let's dive right in. Okay, so the first thing to understand is niceness is not the same as goodness. Oftentimes the confusion about niceness and the lack of willingness to accept what it is comes with conflating it with kindness and goodness. Now, of course, goodness by definition is good, and kindness also, we can agree, is good. But niceness is not exactly kindness. A lot of us think that, hey, if you are nice, then you are good and kind, and all of those mean the same, right? And the answer is absolutely not. What I realized is niceness is completely different from kindness. It might even be orthogonal to kindness. Now, what do I mean by that? So some features of niceness are as follows. You are just caring a lot about others' feelings, even if it's in the interest of you to not do so. So for example, let's say you have a clear creative idea and you want to speak up at work, but you are not able to do so because you're too afraid of what others will think of your idea. Now, the kind thing to do in such a situation is actually to speak up because your creative input matters and you know that your idea is good. But even if you don't know that, you never know. And you know that this makes some contribution to the meeting place. That's why you have it and you're confident about it. But yet you don't say it because you're afraid what your boss might think, or you're afraid what your colleagues might think. And this is niceness versus kindness. The kind thing to do in such a situation would be to speak up, whereas the nice thing to do is to not speak up. Now let's take an example of a more intimate connections. Let's talk about an intimate, close friendship or a romantic connection. Now, if you are nice in this connection, then you will never tell someone what you feel in the current moment. Let's say you want to have some time for yourself. Let's say you want to go to the gym so that you take care of your health, and you know that taking care of your own health will enhance your mood in the relationship, you'll bring more of your energetic self, and perhaps you'll live longer and you'll live certainly healthier. And you want to have that time for yourself. But you know that your partner might get upset with you if you said that. She might feel, or he might feel, that you are just not wanting to give them time. Or you may feel that you're saying that this relationship doesn't matter to me as much. Now, while all of that is completely fictional and you don't know what this person thinks, you are still reacting as if that is going to happen. That is indeed reality. And so the nice person, again, will not express their needs. The nice person will not, again, express their needs and not make their needs and wants known. They fear dislike way too much. There's a lot of feeling management going on. Whereas the kind thing to do in this situation might be to say that, look, I want to go and work out 4 to 6 or whatever, 4 to 5. 4 to 6 might be a long workout. Or I want time for myself, whatever you think you want. And this person might say no, and that's possible, and you may discover incompatibilities. But more often than not, what you will find is that people actually want to support you in this. People actually want to be with you in this, especially the people who truly love you. But regardless, there is a social risk that is needed. And the nice person is unwilling to take that risk because they fear what are the consequences of a rejection in that context. What are the consequences of not getting what they want in that context? And this sort of micro feeling management is the characteristic of niceness, and it differs significantly from kindness, where you might sometimes want to even upset people. The greatest leaders, the greatest creators, the greatest people in history have had to put themselves out there. And I can guarantee you, no one in this list of whoever you admire didn't have people who also hated them. Just the simple act of going outside, some people will be like, this person looks dashing, this person is dressed so well. But there will be someone who will be like, what a show off. Or they'll be like, they look kind of nice, but maybe the shoes aren't good. And so there's no such thing as everyone liking you. And the nice person sort of misses that. It's sort of, it's not that they don't know it consciously. Of course, they are nice and intelligent people, but it somehow unconsciously slips under the radar that that there are people who are going to dislike me, and it's not under my control. So this is the first characteristic of niceness. Now let me explain that in a bit of a different way, in a concept I learned called the selfishness spectrum. Now, by the way, a lot of things I have learned about niceness, the credit will go to Dr. Aziz Gazipura, who has written the book Not Nice, and a lot of my readings also. But largely, I made a lot of progress when I started to work with him. So I want to give him a shout out here. All right, so let's talk about the selfishness spectrum. And so what the selfishness spectrum is, so imagine you have a spectrum, and on the extreme, let's say left of me and right of you, is extreme selfishness. So narcissism. Think of someone who's just too full of themselves and they're just talking about themselves. Some presidents in history come to mind who might be presidents again. And on the right, think about someone who's extremely selfless. So on this extreme, it would be they would absolutely never care about someone. So if they get, let's say the people are sitting on a dinner table, they would probably want the food to be served last to them. Or even worse, they may not even sit with others, and they may just serve others and take care of others. And if there's something left, then they may eat that. And I do know something like this is kind of romanticized, but I think it's awful that it's romanticized. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll figure out why. So again, the selfishness spectrum. On the extreme left, you have narcissism, self-aggrandizement, this puffed up chest without having the substance to back it up. Because, if someone is competent and knows it, then we just call that confidence. And on the extreme other side, we have selflessness, which is complete self-sacrifice. and not coming out of the generosity of heart, which we'll talk about the intention soon. So now in this selfishness spectrum, the nice person tends to live on the selfless side and perhaps too much on the selfless side. So if you imagine there is somewhere in the middle is healthy self-interest where you're caring for others, but you're also caring for others, and there's this nice synergy between you and the world. People on the nice side of life sit on the selflessness side of the selfishness spectrum, and they are worried that even a small switch towards healthy self-interest would actually take them to the massive aggrandizement, just like self-indulgence side of the spectrum, the narcissism side of the spectrum. So even a small switch, even a small nudge towards expressing their needs, and they feel they're like right on the other side where they're just considered rude and arrogant and mean and self-obsessed and so on. And this is the core cognitive distortion of the nice person. They think setting small boundaries, they think expressing their needs, especially with loved ones, will make them arrogant and rude and unworthy and just a distasteful, aberrant person to live with, whereas that completely is untrue. And so a lot of recovery, quote unquote, or a lot of empowerment about understanding niceness and coming out of it is making those switches towards healthy boundaries and healthy self-interests while knowing that the world is fine and they are fine. So the first thing to acknowledge is that there is a genuine concern in there. I completely concur and agree with you if you're nice that being on the complete selfishness side of the spectrum isn't optimal. It's not healthy perhaps. And at least I don't want to live life where I am just obsessed about myself. Not only is that boring, but it just is not meaningful, and that's not a life I want to engage with. But the nice person does not understand that equally true is a life on the other side, where it's just completely selfless. And the reason for that is life is determined, your satisfaction is determined by the feelings and the emotions you have. And when you're on that side of the spectrum, a major feeling and emotion you're feeling is just resentment. Like imagine waking up and the major feeling you feel the whole day and months and years, and indeed that is what nice people have gone through, is resentment. Like that sounds like a bit awful to me. Like that doesn't sound like how I want to wake up. That doesn't feature in my top 3 list of emotions I want to feel tomorrow morning. And so is not guilt, and so is not being afraid always of putting myself out there and living this life of like a bit of a cage where you had something to express, where you had some need, where you fancied something, and you did not. You just sort of stuck with the bare minimum, and sometimes even not that. And that is a problem. So another way to put all of this might be this sort of a responsibility for others' feelings we have is when we are parenting and when we are dealing with children. And the nice person sort of treats everyone as children. They think that anyone whose feelings is hurt, now I'm responsible for that. And indeed, over-responsibility is a key attribute, a key feature of niceness. You can tell a nice person by someone who is just taking responsibility for something that they should not be taking responsibility for. They are parenting someone who they should not be. And that is a very significant and salient feature of niceness that I have observed in people. So far the diagnosis has been that the nice person is a bit too much on the selflessness side of the spectrum, perhaps extremely high on the selflessness side of the spectrum. So the solution seems like pretty obvious. Now all you have to do is come to a balance of more in the middle, more in what I call healthy self-interest. Just set some boundaries, just be a little more selfish and just test it out with the world, and then you're fine. Bye. End of episode, right? Well, it turns out that the move towards healthy self-interest isn't insignificant. It's not just a mere cognitive process. It's not just like intellectually now I understand that I have to move towards self-interest, but I'm just not able to. It's not just intellectually speaking like, okay, now you just move towards self-interest and voila, it's done. Well, it doesn't work that way. And the reason for that is this: guilt. Every time the nice person says no, Every time this nice person tries to move towards healthy self-interest, it's not that the other person is bad or the other person who you're setting the boundary against says something. It's your own guilt that crushes you. So what do I mean by that? Let's say someone asked you for help with their homework or work or study, some sort of assignment. You say that, look, I am on a vacation, I'm on a break right now, and I would love to enjoy this time and just chill. So maybe not. Maybe you should do it yourself. And true story, by the way, this happened to me. And I did, when this happened, this was with someone I knew. And this person had a bit of a micro expression of like a bit of disappointment. And just that small micro expression, they didn't even say anything. They didn't even do anything. But just that small micro expression just sent me into this massive guilt spiral. And that is, again, a classic problem with niceness. So once you understand what niceness is and you intellectually understand it, the main problem you have to handle is this guilt. How do you overcome this guilt? What do you do about this guilt? And so let's do a deep dive into guilt right now. So now problem understood. Now let's try to understand what guilt is. Now guilt, first of all, is a healthy emotion in response to a rule being broken. So you may have a mental rule, and guilt is a signal that, look, that rule is being broken. So let's understand guilt with this example. Now let's say a friend of you is asking you to go out for a meal with them, like a dinner. And 1 week before, when they asked you that, you thought, hey, look, Friday evening next week seems free for me. So let me book that in. Let us go together and have fun. But obviously when Friday comes along, you are tired from this whole entire work day and you just want to take some time off. Now this person goes like, hey, look, we decided let's go out on Friday. Today's Friday, let's go out. And because you're so tired, either you just like put up with it and you go and you feel resentful. We talked a bit about resentment. But let's say you're just not feeling it. So like instead of saying something like, no, I'm a bit tired, can we go out tomorrow? You go something like, oh no, I'm just stuck at work and I'm busy at a meeting right now. So now one of your rules is I like to be honest with people. Then you have broken this rule, and guilt is an appropriate emotion to feel in this sort of a context because it is your mind alerting you that some rule was broken. Maybe we should course correct. Maybe we should be aligned with our values more. Now here's the thing that happens with niceness. In niceness, what happens is some of these rules that we have, they're not even aligned with our values. So for example, one of these rules could be asking for my own time, asking for time just for myself is not a good thing. Or another rule might be saying no is a bad thing. And these rules may or may not be aligned with our values. And in fact, the whole niceness idea, if you think it's a problem, that means it is not aligned with your values. If it were aligned with your values, then you would not be watching this video. So again, guilt is a sign that some rule is broken. And the problem with the guilt that comes from niceness is that the rule that you have is not aligned with your values. In other words, the guilt that is produced from breaking such rules might be unhealthy guilt. It's not a guilt that you should or want to experience. Take, for example, speaking up at work. Now, let's say you did muster that courage and spoke up at work. And let's say people actually did not like it. People were like, why are you talking so much? Now, in this context, there was a rule in people's mind that speaking more than a certain amount is disturbance. And it might as well be true. But is it true when you speak just once? Probably not. So the nice person will feel guilt even if they do that once. Because that expectation, that rule is just so twisted and distorted, and it's not in alignment with what true social rules might be. So let me give you an example of a few rules that I wrote down. So for example, saying no is bad is a rule that I often had. The other rule is something like, if I say no, then this person will get hurt. Again, and I don't want to hurt people, right? So that's another rule there. Another one is, I will not be liked. if I say that. So again, don't say that because I want to be liked, right? So another phrase that's used, and I believe Robert Glover in his book No More Mr. Nice Guy used this phrase first, but I might be wrong. It might predate him. And so another phrase that is used to capture these rules are covert contracts. So you are perennially, constantly in covert contracts with the world. By covert contracts, I mean these are contracts that exist in your mind which you never made. That's why they are covert. So for example, I had this covert contract when I was doing a lot for someone back in my teens, is if I do X, Y, and Z, if I just give my life to this person, then this person will start liking me. Now this is a covert contract which is bad on both sides. From my side, that's not realistic. We never agreed on that. From this person's side, we never agreed on that. And it's kind of creepy then if someone does so much for you, when that was sort of unsolicited. And what was the basis for that again? So this is classically expressed in this stereotypical picture of the guy just bringing flowers to a girl. And the guy just keeps on doing that without realizing that this is totally unwelcomed. So the first time it might be cute, it might be sweet, but the girl just politely says no. But the guy just believes that somehow the way to win this person's heart is just bring on this more flowers and just do a lot of that instead of taking that no head on. And so this is another example of a covert contract that you might be forming with the world where that was just never happened. So again, a good thing at this point is to reflect on where these covert contracts might come from. But before I ask you to do that, let me just talk a bit about where these covert contracts happen. Like when did these rules happen again? Like you said, these rules are not aligned with my values. So how did they end up with me, right? And the answer, like most things psychology, is childhood. So let me give you this example to illustrate this the best. When I was back in India working in my house, I think this was COVID period, we had a few like relatives / family friends at home. And one of the family friends has a little daughter. So like, 3, 4, 5, maybe a bit older, maybe like at best 6. So like kindergarten or primary school age. And there was this time where, there was, the schools were shutting down and there were holidays. And so this little girl just had a ball about like not studying, and she was enjoying the fact that there was no homework and so on. And she was just making it known to everyone that she's absolutely enjoying the fact that she does not have to study. Guess what the big people in the room said? One of the big adults in the room goes like, but you're a good girl, right? You should be the one who's studying. Like, this is not what good girls do. Good girls value studying. Good girls study. And this poor little girl, what is the message that we might be sending someone like this? We are sending this message that if you have even a moment for yourself of relaxation and fun and express yourself and what you truly think in that moment, then you're not a good person. And in this case, at least it was completely, just verbal. Although the disappointment was clear. But at least it was verbal. What about situations in which there was a physical corporal punishments? Now I understand they are on the decline in general in the Western world, maybe even in the Eastern world, but there's still places where corporal punishments is given. And even if it's not corporal, even if it's not physical, then a sharp look of disappointment and emotional passive aggressiveness can do more damage than maybe just even like a slap. So my question to you is, do you have moments in your life back in your day where you did experience something like this? Where you experienced some sort of, where there was like this dark period, at least in your mind where, and this period could be like really short, where you expressed something and then you were like shunned for that. When your authentic expression was met with some sort of a shame or disappointment. So I'm going to give you a moment to reflect on that. Think about what rules you might have created from your childhood or even adulthood for that matter. Like childhood is more common, but it doesn't mean that these rules can't happen in adulthood, which are not in alignment with your values. So for example, a key rule for me was that I cannot talk to others unless I really know them. It sort of speaks lowly of me. And as a result, I struggled with making friendships and getting dates and that sort of a thing. And one of the upgrades I've made in my social confidence over the years and my assertiveness and my not niceness is knowing that I have the permission and the ability to speak to anyone anywhere. Now, of course, people have the permission and their right to say no. But at least for me, I know that that is a contract, that is a rule I want in place, that I can speak to anyone anywhere. That is the social contract I want to make, not the contract where everyone is just on their phones and just disconnected. So again, hopefully you're coming up with some rules in which you were nice, and some rules that if you break, then that is a problem, that makes you feel unworthy or that makes you feel guilty and so on. So what might be these rules for you? Like never say no, or always care about someone, or always be there for your someone. A key phrase in this is always and should. All of these rules that are problematic always have this should element to it. Just like I should always be nice. Now, of course, it's not bad to be there for someone. Like it's a great quality to be compassionate and kind and generous. But always? Like will you not sleep also? Like where's there has to be some boundaries, right? So look out for shoulds and look out for always when you are thinking about what might be these rules which are not in alignment with your values but still make you feel guilty. Like understanding these rules is absolutely critical in overcoming niceness, because now you have a clear roadmap of where you want to set your boundaries. What are the boundaries that do not exist, and what are the boundaries, where are the exact boundaries that you want to set? So if one of your things then becomes that, hey, look, I want to have a couple of hours for myself to work on my health, then the counter rule to that might be I should always be there for others. And just figuring out that rule will open the door for you to block out time for yourself. So now when you go on this inquiry, when you go back and try to figure out where some of these rules might be created, there is a very common and natural tendency for us to descend into blame. You might be like, oh, my family, they messed me up, or my parents messed me up, or my teachers messed me up, and so on, or my friends, whatever, my society, culture, upbringing, community, you name it, church. And it's true that it is in the direct line of causation for your niceness. It is true that someone might have said something which led to niceness you today. But I don't find it useful to get into this blame game. And the reason for that is, how did it come for them anyway? Like they didn't choose to be nice. Like they didn't have emotional intelligence and understanding of what niceness is. And they are probably as helpless, or if not more, than you are about niceness. They just don't know what's happening, and they are doing the best they can to serve you. Like according to them, this is how it works. So while I think it is pretty natural to feel a bit of resentment to the past, all you're doing is adding more resentment. So to whatever extent it's possible, I would invite you to avoid that blame game and just accept that this is what it is right now. And the good thing is, I am grateful to have this opportunity to listen to this discourse on niceness and hopefully read some books, and we'll deal with it. This is life. And anyway, I don't think a life which has no problems is a life worth living anyway. Now I want to talk about a bit about what happens to these needs when we are too nice. Like we have these needs for ourselves. We have the need for maybe a bit of alone time. We have a need to take care of our health. We have a need to express ourselves and form social connections. What happens when, as a result of being too nice, these needs do not get met? It's not that you just nothing happens. There are consequences for this. And I think the most obvious one is what I've seen and what's often described as passive aggression. So you might be like, I can't say no directly, but there might be lots and lots of indirect, sneaky, evil in a bit of a funny ways and manipulative ways in which we sort of let our needs be known. So let's take an example of the fact that someone was late in order to meet you, and perhaps in order to make to that meeting, you sacrificed a lot. So you perhaps got up early and arrived there at time, only to find that the person who you're going to meet was just careless and just was talking on the phone for half an hour before meeting you and so on. And now you are sort of have built this sort of resentment. And again, true story, has happened with me back in the day when I was too nice. And I'm just like taking walks, waiting for two of my friends to arrive so that we can have a meal together. Whereas these two friends are busy being just interacting with each other and just forgetting that I'm waiting. Okay, and now they arrive. So now when they arrive, what do? Do I let my disappointment being known, or do I forgive them? No. What happens is when we are eating these pizzas, I have all of these passive aggressive snides, which is like if they say something, I'm just like, yeah, you always do like that. Let's take another example of when you're out with someone and you had something to say earlier in the day and you did not say that. Maybe it was a fight and you were not able to communicate your side. And when you're out and when they go like, okay, what do you want to eat? Your partner goes like, hey, what do you want to order? And you go like, anyway, you make the decisions in society. Anyway, you make the decisions in this household. Why should I say? Why should I care? And you just don't say anything more. And then they're like, what? Tell me more. What's happening? Are you upset? They're like, no, I'm fine. And so you can see that's a bit of a communication breakdown. Like there's so much of an emotional distance between you and this other person. And this is again how niceness manifests if it is not taken care of. Now there is another potential way that niceness might manifest, which is physical health problems like back pain and immune health problems and so on. And there's some evidence about that. And I'm going to speak about that. It tends to be a bit tentative in my mind, so I'm not going to dive deep right now. But in the end, I will speak a bit about some evidence about niceness and its relationship to back pain and physical health and so on. Oh, and by the way, silent treatment is probably the most extreme of this passive aggressive measures, in which you had something to say, you couldn't say it, and now in order to register your protest, instead of making your demands and needs known, what you're doing is just being silent and pulling that plug of ostracism in what is probably your loved one. Right? So silent treatment is obviously a very big sign of passive aggressiveness, which probably is a sign of some niceness, some need of yours that was supposed to be met, which did not get met. And then this is your very twisted way of getting attention and love in that moment. So hopefully you have some rules by now. Hopefully some of these examples were inspiring. One exercise I would like to suggest after you have clarity and you have clarity on your rules is what I call the Bill of Rights. In this exercise, what you do is you look at your rules and then you figure out whether these rules, are they aligned with my values? Is this a rule that I want to keep? And for the rules that you do not want to keep, you create what I call the Bill of Rights. And what that Bill of Rights essentially is, you write those rules and reframe them to the rules that you want to be. So for example, you write it as, I have the right to blank. So if previously you had the rule that I should never say no to anyone, in your Bill of Rights you write, I have the right to say no to anyone at any time and for any reason or for no reason. And that's, I think, a fine rule to have. Now, of course, they have the right to say no as well. And they have the right to, if one of your rules is I have the right to ask for anything, then they have the right also to say no. And, then we have to navigate this interesting social maze. But the first thing in this process is for you to understand what your rules are and what rules you should keep. So one of my rules is I have the right to start a conversation with anyone. And obviously the counterpart to that is they have the right to not engage in that conversation, and then that's fine. Then we leave it at that. But more often than not, when I have exercised and engaged with this rule, when I've actually gone out, or right rather, and I've gone out and talked to these people and made friends, I've made so many friends and connections and so on, and I have had some beautiful moments just by the virtue of saying that first hello, when both of us were thinking that this is not socially perhaps right context to say hello, maybe in a bus stop or something. So again, have a Bill of Rights for yourself. I have the right to talk to anyone anywhere. I have the right to ask for anything I want. I have the right to dance on the street, if you will. Make it what you want. And actually, this exercise raises a very interesting and important question about rights, and a political question about rights. Like we all think that rights, like human rights and the fact that we have the right to privacy and the right to safety and all of that, we all think that all of those things have just come from nature. Like somehow naturally we have the right to privacy. But that is absolutely not true. What is the case is that we as humans have decided that every human will have this fictional right. And by fictional, I mean it's only true when everyone cooperates for that. There's no such thing as fairness, let's say, or justice in nature. Like you just have to watch a few animal documentaries to see that. Like anyone gets killed and eaten all the time. But we as humans have decided that we will create these things called rights, which are essentially fictions, according to which we will all cooperate. And those sort of rules make us live healthy and better lives in general. And so another thing to note is that rules are not bad. It's just they are bad when they are not aligned with our values and they are made unconsciously, not intentionally. And a flip side to that is if there are some of these social contracts that are not aligned with your values, then they can be foregone. Now, of course, some of these rights are what we have endowed in the Constitution, and these are legal rules that we all decide to enforce essentially on others, so that the hope is that this leads to healthy and meaningful lives for everyone. But then there are also rules which are not laws, which are just social contracts that are in our head. And all of these kinds of social contracts are malleable. Like there is no restriction on what can be a rule or what cannot be a rule short of being a law. And in this case, you have the judgment call to make about what other social contracts you want to have in your life. And I would bet that if you're a nice person, these optional social contracts, you have a list of them. And a key to coming out of those social contracts is recognizing that these social contracts are totally fictional and malleable, and you can indeed change them. And if people are disappointed, that's fine. But you have the right to create those, because all the ones that you cannot create, like hurting others and so on, hopefully those are laws already. Okay, so now that you have a sense of what your rights are, the next part is communicating your rights. It's one thing to know what your rights are, but there is an additional step there, which is that of communication. Like it is possible to be a bit unskillful in your communication. So let's say if someone asks for dinner tonight and you be like, get lost. That probably is not a very skillful way of saying no. So there are a few ways that you can optimize your communication. I've made a whole podcast episode on it that you can check out later, but I'll just give you a few tips right here. So for example, you could use phrases like these. You could say something like, I noticed, blah, blah, blah. So you could say something like, hey, I noticed that yesterday when I talked to you, you seemed a bit upset. Is there anything that's bothering you? Can we talk about it? So I noticed is quite a powerful one to bring out a need of yours or something that's sort of sitting with you, which you want to express and you want to clarify. Another good one is when you say blank, the story that I tell myself is blank. So for example, when you say that those glasses are not good looking, the story I make up for myself is that I am not good looking and I'm not beautiful. So when you say that you don't like these glasses, the story that I make up for myself is I'm the one who is unattractive. That can be an example. True story. So the more you can highlight that, this is currently a fiction in my mind and let's talk about it, that's how you're able to convey your needs more clearly. And you then end up being blaming because you're saying, that's the story I'm making. But hey, these are my needs, which is to, feel attractive in this case. And this is a very skillful way of navigating it. So now you have everything you need to start your journey to become less nice. But that does not mean that you're not going to feel bad. Like you will obviously be breaking all of these rules and you're going to feel guilt and you'll have all of these unpleasant emotions come up when you break your own social rule. Especially when you see that people are not reacting well. If you break a social rule, your own by the way, and you see people reacting well, for example, talking to strangers, most people react very well to that, you will feel great. It's going to be one of the best feelings of your life. But you might still, especially in the process, you might feel a lot of guilt, especially if someone has an unpleasant micro or major reaction to it. And so I'm going to talk about tools on how do you manage these unpleasant emotions. that come up in our journeys to be less nice and more us. Method is mindfulness meditation. Whenever you're feeling feelings of guilt, let's say you just said no and set a boundary. Let's say you said to your friend that, hey, look, I'm a bit busy tonight. I would love to meet you, but sorry, buddy, I'm just not feeling well. And this friend goes like, really? I just canceled my whole day just to meet you today. And you're like, oops, I'm sorry, but I just can't. And then you just feel this massive sense of guilt, like I'm a bad person. What does this friend think of me? I will have no friends in the future and so on. Whenever you feel that, you're going to feel a lot of unpleasant emotions, right? The way to deal with that, first and foremost, is mindfulness meditation, is to just accept the emotions as they are. What is happening right now is you're changing the way you are, and you're breaking your own rules, and naturally you're going to feel guilt. And when you just sit with your feelings, you're giving the body the signal that you can chill. This is okay. We got this in control. This is part of my plan. These are my new values now. And the friend will be fine. And we'll see that. And the more you do it, the more you'll see that the friend was actually fine. And slowly you'll feel less of that when setting boundaries as well. And you'll also attract people in your life who are okay with you setting boundaries as well. So mindfulness meditation, and I have a whole video on starting with meditation and the lessons I learned with meditation right here. And I have a whole video about mindfulness meditation and starting with meditation. And I've been meditating for 8 years, by the way, and the lessons I've learned with meditation. And you can find that either in the show notes and the recommended somewhere. But yeah, dealing with the aftermath of guilt and feeling unpleasant largely boils down to accepting that you're going to face discomfort, accepting that you're going to face pain, and that you're okay with it. And it will take a little while to retrain your mind through mindfulness, through you can take therapy, of course, or you can do cognitive therapy and just on yourself and so on. There are lots of tools. So anything will fit. My favorite is mindfulness meditation. Okay, so this was Niceness, and I'm going to finally wrap this episode talking about mind-body pain. Now, mind-body pain is this frontier area of research, I would say, in which the claim is that the consequence of being too nice is actually physical pain and physical illness. And so the evidence for that comes from, I think, one of the strongest papers written on this area is what's often called as the Boulder Pain Study, if I'm not mistaken. And this is an article published in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, also known as. The first author is Asher, 2021 study. And what they did is they took 50 people with chronic back pain. So these are people who are suffering from back pain for years. And what they did was they put these people on what they call pain reprocessing therapy, which is essentially talking about this mind-body connection. So it's a bit like mindfulness, but a bit more guided. And I'm going to leave you to Google what it is. But essentially, they will ask you to focus on these feelings, and either it comes from niceness or otherwise, or back pain and so on. And the emotions that are associated with it. And they ask you to be mindful about it and visualize it moving and so on. And what they found essentially was 33 out of these 50 people with chronic back pain experienced significant relief after just implementing this mind-body connection. Now, I am not suggesting that if you have back pain that you should do this first. I don't think the science is strong enough to suggest that at all. You should obviously do the regular things of talking to a physio or going to a doctor, getting x-rays and all of that. But if you find that there is no concrete physical reason for why things are happening the way they are, I also don't see a downside in trying these mind-body type connection stuff. And indeed, Dr. Aziz talks about it. There's another chap, Dr. Sano, who's probably the first person who noticed this connection between the people in his clinic who had back pain and other physical pain symptoms and their personality, which is they were too nice. So all of this study makes me wonder if there is a cost to niceness, and the answer seems to be yes. So certainly there is an emotional cost, and it takes an emotional and a mental health toll to be nice. But there may also be physical consequences to being nice, and that might include back pain, amongst other things. But otherwise, I just want to leave you with the thought of the cost of niceness, even if it's just emotional. It creates resentment, it makes you feel small, and it takes away a bit of your energy in your life. It takes away who you are. Like, your energetic signature might be this one with swag person walking and striding. And now, as a nice person, you're hunched down and you're walking like that, instead of sharing your all of you with the world, not just some parts of you that you consider safe. Like, for example, if you like to study, which I absolutely love to, then I was happy to share those parts of me. But then I was not as happy to share perhaps the creative parts of me, and so on. So, if you're nice, hopefully this guide helps you. Hopefully it condenses a lot of information for you. I recommend the book Not Nice if you want to go deeper. I recommend my conversation with Dr. Aziz on this channel. It's right here. Check that out. I think that's a perfect next step if you want to go deeper into Not Nice. This is Sankalp signing off.